Welcome to Monk's Temple. Let us begin not with an instruction, but with an invitation. An invitation to simply be. To be here, in this moment, with no requirement other than to exist. Feel the weight of your body wherever it is resting. Notice the subtle dance of air as it enters and leaves your body. There is nowhere you need to go in this moment. Nothing you need to become. We are simply returning to a fundamental truth, a truth that has been gently waiting beneath the surface of all your doing, all your thinking, all your striving. We are returning to silence. But this silence is not what you might imagine. It is not a blank void, an emptiness to be feared. In the profound wisdom tradition of Buddhism, silence is considered one of the highest forms of understanding. The Buddha himself, after his great awakening, is said to have spent weeks abiding in the radiant silence of that truth, knowing that some realities are too vast for words. He taught that the path to the end of suffering is paved with mindful awareness, and at the heart of this awareness lies a deep, listening quiet. This is not the quiet of a library, but the quiet of a vast, open sky. A sky that can hold every storm cloud, every streak of lightning, every brilliant sunset, without being damaged or defined by any of them. The sky remains, silent, spacious, and fundamentally untouched. This is the silence we are exploring. The silence that you are, at your very core. Let me share a story from my own life, a story that first hinted to me that this silence was more than just an absence. Years ago, I found myself in a season of relentless noise. It was internal noise. A churning torrent of plans, worries, self-criticism, and an endless replaying of conversations. My mind was a crowded, noisy train station at the peak of rush hour, and I was lost in the crowd, trying to shout over the loudspeaker announcements of my own anxiety. One afternoon, utterly drained, I went for a walk in a nearby botanical garden. I had no intention of meditating or finding peace, I was just trying to outwalk the noise in my head. I stopped before a massive, ancient oak tree. Its trunk was gnarled and twisted, a record of centuries written in bark. Without thinking, I placed my palm against it. I closed my eyes. And I just stood there. For a few minutes, I did nothing but feel the rough, solid reality of that tree under my hand. I didn't try to quiet my mind. I just let the chaotic thoughts be there, like chattering birds in the branches of this tree. But my primary anchor was the silent, steadfast presence of the oak. A strange shift began to occur. The noisy train station of my mind didn't vanish, but it seemed to grow distant, as if I were hearing it from another room. The solid, silent reality of the tree in the present moment became more immediate, more real, than the frantic stories in my head. In that simple act of tactile, silent connection, I had, for a moment, stepped out of the narrative and into the now. I had touched a silence that was alive, potent, and deeply peaceful. It was a silence that didn't reject my noise, but held it, just as the tree held the birds in its branches. That experience was a tiny crack of light, a proof that there was another way to exist. It wasn't about defeating the noise, but about discovering the ground beneath it. If the idea of finding a solid ground within your own experience resonates with you, consider this your personal invitation to explore further with us here at Monk's Temple. By subscribing, you're not just clicking a button, you're ringing a gentle bell of intention for yourself, a reminder to nurture this seed of quiet awareness. We are a community dedicated to this inner exploration, and we would be honored to have you join us. Now, let's explore this ground further. That experience under the oak tree points to a core principle. We often believe that our identity is the collection of our thoughts, our memories, our reactions. The noisy crowd in the train station. Buddhism offers a radical and liberating perspective. You are not the crowd. You are the spacious awareness in which the crowd comes and goes. Think of your mind as a vast, clear lake. The weather of your life, your joyful thoughts, your anxious worries, your passing frustrations, these are like weather on the lake's surface. Sunshine creates sparkles, wind creates choppy waves, a storm creates turbulence. We spend our lives identifying with the weather. We say, "I am anxious," when we are experiencing the choppy waves of anxiety. We say, "I am happy," when we feel the sparkles of joy. But what if you could instead identify with the lake itself? The lake is aware of all the weather. It feels the wind, it is stirred by the storm, it basks in the sun. Yet, deep below the surface, in its darkest, deepest waters, the lake is still, silent, and unmoved. Its essential nature is wet, clear, and holding. The surface conditions never change the fundamental lakeness of the lake. Your practice of silence is the process of diving beneath the agitated surface to remember your true nature as the deep, still water. The Buddha's teachings guide us to this dive, to this profound re-identification. It's not about becoming perpetually calm on the surface, that's an impossible task. It's about knowing, with unshakable certainty, that beneath whatever storm is passing, you are the deep, silent, aware lake. This knowing is freedom. This leads us to the first of our guiding metaphors for this journey. Imagine your consciousness not as a lake, but as an endless, star-filled night sky. Your thoughts, sensations, and emotions are the stars, planets, and occasional streaking meteors. Some stars are bright constellations of recurring ideas. Some are dim, forgotten memories. A meteor of anger might blaze across the black. We spend our lives gazing at the stars, studying them, believing they define the sky. We get fascinated by one constellation called my problems, or terrified by the meteor shower of my fears. We forget the most fundamental element, the vast, dark, silent space that holds all these points of light. That silent space is not empty. It is the precondition for anything to appear. Without the dark sky, you could not see the stars. Your true essence is that boundless, silent sky. The stars of thought come and go, but the sky of your awareness remains, unchanging, welcoming, and profoundly still. Every moment of intentional silence is an act of turning your gaze from the stars to the space between them. It is coming home to the infinity that you are. Let us continue our exploration of this infinite, inner sky. This understanding, that you are the space, not the objects appearing within it, is perhaps the most vital and shocking benefit of cultivating silence. It recontextualizes every experience of your life. A difficult emotion is no longer a prison you are trapped inside, it is a passing weather system in your vast sky. A painful memory is not a scar defining you, it is an old, fading star in your limitless night. This is the heart of Buddhist wisdom regarding the self, or anatta. The realization that what you call I is not a solid, separate thing, but a flowing, interconnected process happening within awareness. Silence is the laboratory where you directly experience this truth. When you sit in silence, you are not doing nothing. You are engaging in the most profound act of listening. You are listening to the universe speaking the language of your own being. In the beginning, what you hear might sound like chaos. The chatter of thoughts, the rumble of bodily sensations, the echo of emotions. This is not failure. This is the first layer of the symphony. You are learning to discern the individual instruments. And as you listen, without trying to change the tune, a miracle occurs. The frantic conductor, the part of you that thinks it must control everything, begins to tire. The instruments, no longer fought against, start to play more softly. And beneath them, you begin to hear the fundamental note, the drone of existence itself. It is a note of silent, vibrating presence. This is the peace that surpasses understanding. It was always there, singing beneath the noise of your life, waiting for you to be quiet enough to hear it. I want to share a story about a friend named Alara, a concert cellist. She described her relationship with music in a way that perfectly illustrates this. During a performance, she explained, there is the obvious layer, the sound of her cello, the notes on the page, the technique of her fingers. But the magic, the moment when the music truly becomes something that moves the audience, happens in the silences. There's a micro-silence between the notes, she said. A tiny, suspended breath where the previous note decays and the next one is about to be born. That silence is not empty. It's charged with potential. It's where the emotion of the piece actually lives and gathers power. If I rush through that silence, afraid of the quiet, the music becomes flat, just a sequence of sounds. But if I can rest in that silence, trust it, inhabit it, then the next note arrives with its full depth and meaning. My entire practice, she concluded, has become less about perfecting the notes and more about honoring the silence between them. That's where the soul of the music is. Our lives are Alara's symphony. Our actions, words, and thoughts are the notes. But the meaning, the depth, the soul of our experience, is cultivated in the silent spaces between them. Without those spaces, life becomes a frantic, flat sequence of events. Silence is how we compose a meaningful life, by consciously including the rests. This practice of honoring the silent rests requires a certain kind of courage. It means turning toward discomfort, not away from it. Our modern world is a masterpiece of distraction, a glittering array of tools designed to help us avoid the silent space between our own notes. We pick up our phones, turn on the television, create more busyness, anything to avoid the simple, unadorned presence of being. We fear that in the silence, we will meet something unpleasant, boredom, sadness, loneliness, or our own perceived inadequacies. And we might. But here is the second shocking benefit: silence is not where you meet your demons. It is where you discover they are made of smoke. In the bright, gentle light of silent awareness, the monsters under the bed are revealed to be piles of old clothes and forgotten toys. The process is simple but not easy. You sit, you listen, and you stop fighting. You see the thought, "I am not enough," arise. Instead of believing it, building a case for it, or frantically trying to affirm the opposite, you simply note, here is that not enough thought again. You see the anxious fear about the future arise. You note, here is anxiety. You don't feed it with stories. You don't try to shove it away. You let it be a passing sensation in the body, a cloud in your sky. In the space of non-reactive silence, these patterns lose their power to define you. They are seen for what they are, habitual energy, not ultimate truth. This is the essence of vipassana, or insight meditation, in the Buddhist tradition. Seeing things as they truly are, which often means seeing that they are less solid, less permanent, and less personal than we believed. Let me introduce another metaphor. Consider your mind as a magnificent, old-fashioned diving bell. For most of your life, this bell has been suspended just below the surface of a turbulent ocean. The ocean is the world of sensory experience and thought, constantly moving, churning, noisy. From inside the bell, you hear the muffled roar of the waves, see the distorted light, feel the sway of the currents. You believe the ocean's turmoil is your reality. The practice of silence is the process of slowly, patiently, lowering the diving bell on its cable. As you descend, the surface noise begins to fade. The chaotic light patterns soften. The swaying lessens. You go deeper, into the twilight zone, where less light penetrates. It may feel dark, unfamiliar. You might see shadowy shapes, the creatures of your deeper psyche. But you keep descending, anchored by your breath, by your intention to simply be. Finally, you reach the ocean floor. Here, it is profoundly still. The water is crystal clear. The sediment of your stirred-up thoughts has settled. There is a gentle, eternal quiet. From this vantage point, you can look up and see the storm raging on the surface, but it is distant, almost beautiful in its irrelevance to the peace down here. You realize the storm was always temporary, always on the surface. Your true home is this silent, grounded depth. And you learn that you can lower your diving bell, return to this silent depth, at any time, no matter what storms are raging above. You carry the ocean floor within you. This is not a metaphor of escape. It is a metaphor of foundation. The Buddhist path is about finding the unshakable foundation for a sane and compassionate life. That foundation is not a belief or a philosophy. It is a direct experience of the silent, aware ground of being. Every tradition has its name for this, the Buddha nature, the unconditioned, nirvana. It sounds lofty, but it is as immediate as the feeling of your next breath entering your body in a moment of total, non-judgmental attention. That breath, felt fully, is a doorway to the ocean floor. I recall a time when I was trying to master a complex new skill for my work. My approach was typical. Relentless effort, grinding practice, frustration, and a rising tide of self-doubt. The more I struggled, the noisier my mind became, and the worse I performed. I hit a wall. In desperation, I stopped. I put everything away. For 3 days, I didn't practice at all. I did simple, silent things. I walked. I watched the steam rise from my tea. I just sat. On the 4th day, I returned to the task with no expectation. A curious thing happened. My mind was quiet. My hands seemed to know what to do without my frantic thinking telling them. I flowed. The breakthrough I had been hammering at for weeks arrived effortlessly, not through force, but through the fertile space created by silence. It was as if I had been trying to force a seed to grow by yelling at it, and only when I sat quietly and provided space, soil, and water did it finally sprout. The intelligence we seek is not in the noise of our striving. It is in the silence that allows deeper wisdom to emerge. This is the practical magic of silence. It doesn't just bring peace, it brings solutions, creativity, and a kind of effortless intelligence that struggle can never access. Let's explore this idea of silence as a foundation for intelligence and creativity a little deeper. We live in a culture that worships the active mind, the thinker, the planner, the problem solver on overdrive. We believe that more thinking, more analysis, more mental noise will lead us to the answer. But what if the most profound answers come not from thinking more, but from thinking less? What if clarity is not the product of a busy mind, but the natural state of a mind that has been allowed to rest in its own silent awareness? This is a central, yet often overlooked, tenet of the path the Buddha laid out. He taught samavayama, right effort, but this effort is not about straining and forcing. It is the gentle, persistent effort of returning to presence, of letting go of distraction, of cultivating a mind that is at ease. A mind at ease is a mind that can see clearly. From this clear, silent space, action arises that is precise, compassionate, and timely. It is not reactive action, born from the noise of fear or desire. It is responsive action, born from the quiet clarity of wisdom. Imagine your mind as a snow globe that has been shaken vigorously. Inside, there is a beautiful scene, a miniature temple, trees, a peaceful landscape. But when the globe is shaken, the water fills with glittering flakes, swirling in a chaotic storm, completely obscuring the scene. You cannot see the temple. You cannot appreciate the landscape. All you see is the blinding, confusing swirl. This is the state of our minds when filled with the noise of worry, planning, regret, and anticipation. We are so focused on the swirling flakes that we forget the serene landscape that lies beneath, waiting. The practice of silence is the simple act of setting the snow globe down on a steady surface. You stop shaking it. You stop adding more agitation. And then, you wait. You don't try to force the flakes to settle faster. You just allow the natural law of gravity to do its work. Slowly, gradually, the frantic swirl begins to slow. The flakes start to drift downward. The water begins to clear. And as it clears, the beautiful, detailed landscape within is revealed. It was always there, perfect and intact. It was only hidden by the temporary storm you were creating. Your innate wisdom, your inner peace, your core clarity, this is the landscape. The thoughts are just the snow. Silence is the act of ceasing to shake the globe, so your true nature can become visible once more. This has profound implications for how we live. We often try to solve our problems by shaking the snow globe even harder, thinking more, worrying more, planning more contingencies. We create more noise, more inner blizzard, and become even more lost. The revolutionary act is to do the opposite, to set the globe down. To be still. To trust that in the quiet, the solution, or the acceptance, or the next right step, will become visible because you will finally be able to see the lay of your own inner land. I knew a man named Thomas, a master mechanic for vintage airplanes. His workshop was a place of organized chaos, filled with the skeletons of old aircraft. People brought him engines that no one else could fix, complex, finicky machines that had fallen silent. I asked him once what his secret was. He smiled and pointed to an old, grease-stained armchair in the corner of his shop. "That's my most important tool," he said. When faced with a particularly baffling problem, he explained, he wouldn't immediately grab his wrenches. He would sit in that chair, sometimes for an hour or more, just looking at the engine. He wouldn't actively think about solutions. He would just observe. He'd watch the way the light fell on a piston. He'd note the pattern of oil stains. He'd sit in a kind of receptive silence, letting the machine speak to him. In the quiet, he said, the problem starts to tell you its own story. You stop seeing what you expect to see, or what the manual says you should see, and you start to see what's actually there. The answer doesn't come as a thought, it comes as a knowing. And then you get up, and your hands know exactly what to do. Thomas was practicing a form of deep, silent intimacy. He was not imposing his noisy will on the problem, he was creating a silent space for the solution to reveal itself. Our lives are those complex engines. We often try to fix them with the noisy tools of force, willpower, and frantic analysis. But the deepest repairs, the ones that bring us back into harmony, often happen when we have the courage to sit in the silent chair and simply listen. This leads us to another vital aspect of silence, its role in healing our relationships, starting with the one we have with ourselves. In the constant noise, we are often at war with ourselves. One part of us wants to rest, another part demands productivity. One part feels grief, another part says we should be over it by now. We are a cacophony of conflicting voices. Silence is the space where this internal parliament can be heard, not to start a debate, but to witness the proceedings with compassion. When you sit silently and a wave of self-criticism arises, instead of getting into an argument with it, I shouldn't think that, you can simply acknowledge its presence. Ah, the inner critic is speaking. You greet it with silent, non-judgmental awareness. In that greeting, something shifts. The critic, whose power depends on you fighting it or believing it, is disarmed. It is seen. It may grumble a bit more, but it loses its compelling force. This is the practice of matri, or loving kindness, directed inward. It begins in silence. You cannot hate yourself into a state of peace. You can only listen yourself into one. And from this inner peace, a new quality of listening extends outward. Consider your next conversation. Usually, when someone is speaking, we are not truly listening. We are hearing their words while simultaneously preparing our rebuttal, crafting our story, judging their opinion, or drifting off into our own memories. This is listening through noise. Silent listening is different. It is when you offer someone the profound gift of your full, undivided, silent attention. You listen not just to their words, but to the cadence of their voice, the pauses, the emotion behind the language. You listen with your whole being. You create a silent, sacred container for them to express themselves fully. In that container, miracles of connection happen. People feel seen, understood, and valued in a way that words of advice or affirmation can never achieve. This is active, engaged silence. It is not withdrawal, it is the deepest form of participation. The Buddha was a master of this. He listened so completely that people felt their deepest truths being understood before they were even fully spoken. This is a skill we can all cultivate, and it begins in the private silence of our own practice, where we learn to listen to ourselves without agenda. Let me share a story about a teacher I had in my youth, Mrs. Almeida. She taught literature, but her real subject was attention. In her class, when a student was speaking, whether giving a brilliant analysis or stumbling through a half-formed idea, the entire room would fall into a hushed, respectful silence. Mrs. Almeida would sit perfectly still, her eyes soft and focused entirely on the speaker. She never interrupted. She never glanced at the clock. She listened as if the student were revealing the secrets of the universe. The effect was transformative. Shy students found their voices. Rambling students found clarity. Everyone felt that what they had to say mattered, because she demonstrated, through her profound silent attention, that it did. Years later, I asked her about it. She said, "I'm not listening to critique their ideas. I'm listening to meet the mind behind them. In the silence of my listening, they can hear themselves think. And that is where real learning begins." She taught me that the most powerful thing we can often offer another person is not our speech, but our silence. A silence so full of respect and presence that it becomes a sanctuary for their soul to emerge. This is the silence that heals, connects, and transforms relationships. Let's explore this idea of silence as a foundation for intelligence and creativity a little deeper. We live in a culture that worships the active mind, the thinker, the planner, the problem solver on overdrive. We believe that more thinking, more analysis, more mental noise will lead us to the answer. But what if the most profound answers come not from thinking more, but from thinking less? What if clarity is not the product of a busy mind, but the natural state of a mind that has been allowed to rest in its own silent awareness? This is a central, yet often overlooked, tenet of the path the Buddha laid out. He taught samavayama, right effort, but this effort is not about straining and forcing. It is the gentle, persistent effort of returning to presence, of letting go of distraction, of cultivating a mind that is at ease. A mind at ease is a mind that can see clearly. From this clear, silent space, action arises that is precise, compassionate, and timely. It is not reactive action, born from the noise of fear or desire. It is responsive action, born from the quiet clarity of wisdom. Imagine your mind as a snow globe that has been shaken vigorously. Inside, there is a beautiful scene, a miniature temple, trees, a peaceful landscape. But when the globe is shaken, the water fills with glittering flakes, swirling in a chaotic storm, completely obscuring the scene. You cannot see the temple. You cannot appreciate the landscape. All you see is the blinding, confusing swirl. This is the state of our minds when filled with the noise of worry, planning, regret, and anticipation. We are so focused on the swirling flakes that we forget the serene landscape that lies beneath, waiting. The practice of silence is the simple act of setting the snow globe down on a steady surface. You stop shaking it. You stop adding more agitation. And then, you wait. You don't try to force the flakes to settle faster. You just allow the natural law of gravity to do its work. Slowly, gradually, the frantic swirl begins to slow. The flakes start to drift downward. The water begins to clear. And as it clears, the beautiful, detailed landscape within is revealed. It was always there, perfect and intact. It was only hidden by the temporary storm you were creating. Your innate wisdom, your inner peace, your core clarity, this is the landscape. The thoughts are just the snow. Silence is the act of ceasing to shake the globe, so your true nature can become visible once more. This has profound implications for how we live. We often try to solve our problems by shaking the snow globe even harder, thinking more, worrying more, planning more contingencies. We create more noise, more inner blizzard, and become even more lost. The revolutionary act is to do the opposite, to set the globe down. To be still. To trust that in the quiet, the solution, or the acceptance, or the next right step, will become visible because you will finally be able to see the lay of your own inner land. I knew a man named Thomas, a master mechanic for vintage airplanes. His workshop was a place of organized chaos, filled with the skeletons of old aircraft. People brought him engines that no one else could fix, complex, finicky machines that had fallen silent. I asked him once what his secret was. He smiled and pointed to an old, grease-stained armchair in the corner of his shop. "That's my most important tool," he said. When faced with a particularly baffling problem, he explained, he wouldn't immediately grab his wrenches. He would sit in that chair, sometimes for an hour or more, just looking at the engine. He wouldn't actively think about solutions. He would just observe. He'd watch the way the light fell on a piston. He'd note the pattern of oil stains. He'd sit in a kind of receptive silence, letting the machine speak to him. In the quiet, he said, the problem starts to tell you its own story. You stop seeing what you expect to see, or what the manual says you should see, and you start to see what's actually there. The answer doesn't come as a thought, it comes as a knowing. And then you get up, and your hands know exactly what to do. Thomas was practicing a form of deep, silent intimacy. He was not imposing his noisy will on the problem, he was creating a silent space for the solution to reveal itself. Our lives are those complex engines. We often try to fix them with the noisy tools of force, willpower, and frantic analysis. But the deepest repairs, the ones that bring us back into harmony, often happen when we have the courage to sit in the silent chair and simply listen. This leads us to another vital aspect of silence, its role in healing our relationships, starting with the one we have with ourselves. In the constant noise, we are often at war with ourselves. One part of us wants to rest, another part demands productivity. One part feels grief, another part says we should be over it by now. We are a cacophony of conflicting voices. Silence is the space where this internal parliament can be heard, not to start a debate, but to witness the proceedings with compassion. When you sit silently and a wave of self-criticism arises, instead of getting into an argument with it, "I shouldn't think that," you can simply acknowledge its presence. Ah, the inner critic is speaking. You greet it with silent, non-judgmental awareness. In that greeting, something shifts. The critic, whose power depends on you fighting it or believing it, is disarmed. It is seen. It may grumble a bit more, but it loses its compelling force. This is the practice of matri, or loving kindness, directed inward. It begins in silence. You cannot hate yourself into a state of peace. You can only listen yourself into one. And from this inner peace, a new quality of listening extends outward. Consider your next conversation. Usually, when someone is speaking, we are not truly listening. We are hearing their words while simultaneously preparing our rebuttal, crafting our story, judging their opinion, or drifting off into our own memories. This is listening through noise. Silent listening is different. It is when you offer someone the profound gift of your full, undivided, silent attention. You listen not just to their words, but to the cadence of their voice, the pauses, the emotion behind the language. You listen with your whole being. You create a silent, sacred container for them to express themselves fully. In that container, miracles of connection happen. People feel seen, understood, and valued in a way that words of advice or affirmation can never achieve. This is active, engaged silence. It is not withdrawal, it is the deepest form of participation. The Buddha was a master of this. He listened so completely that people felt their deepest truths being understood before they were even fully spoken. This is a skill we can all cultivate, and it begins in the private silence of our own practice, where we learn to listen to ourselves without agenda. Let me share a story about a teacher I had in my youth, Mrs. Almeida. She taught literature, but her real subject was attention. In her class, when a student was speaking, whether giving a brilliant analysis or stumbling through a half-formed idea, the entire room would fall into a hushed, respectful silence. Mrs. Almeida would sit perfectly still, her eyes soft and focused entirely on the speaker. She never interrupted. She never glanced at the clock. She listened as if the student were revealing the secrets of the universe. The effect was transformative. Shy students found their voices. Rambling students found clarity. Everyone felt that what they had to say mattered, because she demonstrated, through her profound silent attention, that it did. Years later, I asked her about it. She said, "I'm not listening to critique their ideas. I'm listening to meet the mind behind them. In the silence of my listening, they can hear themselves think. And that is where real learning begins." She taught me that the most powerful thing we can often offer another person is not our speech, but our silence. A silence so full of respect and presence that it becomes a sanctuary for their soul to emerge. This is the silence that heals, connects, and transforms relationships. Let us dwell for a while in this profound relationship between silence and the inevitable challenges of life. We've spoken of silence as a canyon holding the river of grief. Let's expand that view. Imagine now that you are not a canyon, but a deep, still pond in the heart of a forest. The pond's surface is so calm it acts as a perfect mirror, reflecting the sky, the trees, the passing clouds with impeccable clarity. This is the mind in its natural state of silent awareness, reflecting reality exactly as it is, without distortion. Now, life happens. A stone of hardship is thrown into the pond. It might be the stone of a harsh word, a financial setback, an illness, a betrayal. The moment the stone hits, the surface is shattered. Ripples radiate out in chaotic circles. The clear reflection is gone, replaced by a mess of fragmented, moving images. The water itself is disturbed, mud from the bottom may be stirred up. This is our typical state when difficulty strikes. We are all ripples and mud. We are caught in the fragmented, chaotic reaction. We believe the disturbance is us. We think, I am shattered. I am muddy. I am lost. But here is the crucial insight, the one that silence teaches: you are not the ripples on the surface. You are the entire pond, including its profound depths. The stone impacts the surface, but 30 feet down, the water is still cool, dark, and completely undisturbed. The ripples are a temporary phenomenon in one layer of your being. Your practice of silence is the process of remembering your depth. It is feeling past the agitated surface and connecting with the still, cold, dark water at the bottom of your own soul. From that depth, you can watch the ripples with curiosity, even compassion. Ah, look at that. The stone of bad news has caused quite a stir up top. But you are not identified with the stir. You are the vast body of water that contains it. This is the unshakable peace the mystics speak of. It is not an emotion of happiness, it is the ontological reality of your deep, silent nature, which can never be truly disturbed by any surface event. The Buddha's enlightenment was the permanent realization of this depth. Our practice is the frequent remembrance of it. I learned about this depth from a most unlikely teacher, a commercial fisherman named Silas. I met him on a long ferry ride along a rugged coast. He had a face etched by wind and salt, and the calmest eyes I'd ever seen. We got to talking about storms. He described the terrifying power of a North Atlantic gale, waves taller than houses, wind that could tear metal. So what do you do in a storm like that? I asked, imagining a frantic battle at the helm. He shook his head. You don't fight it. That's how you die. You do the counterintuitive thing. You make your boat as small a target as possible. You batten everything down. And then you point the bow into the wind and waves, and you let the engine just idle, barely holding position. You surrender to the motion. You become part of the storm's rhythm. He looked out at the calm sea we were on. The secret, he said, is knowing the storm is only on the surface. 20 fathoms down, right below your keel, it's as still as this water is right now. Your job isn't to calm the surface. Your job is to trust the depth beneath you, and to adjust your vessel so it can ride the surface chaos without being torn apart. You find a fierce kind of peace in that. You're in the maelstrom, but you're connected to the stillness underneath it all. His words were a perfect manual for inner life. The storms of emotion, loss, and stress are surface phenomena. Our spiritual practice is the process of building a vessel, our mindful awareness, that can be pointed into the storm, while our trust is anchored in the silent, still depth of our true nature, which is never, ever disturbed. Silence is how we establish that connection to the depth. It is the line we cast down into our own still waters. This understanding naturally brings us to another cornerstone of Buddhist practice that is cultivated in silence, equanimity, or upekkha. Equanimity is not indifference. It is not a cold, unfeeling detachment. It is the balanced, spacious heart that can hold joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, without being overthrown by any of them. It is the pond that can reflect a sunny sky or storm clouds with equal clarity. How do we develop this? Not by forcing ourselves to not care, but through the repeated return to silent awareness. In silence, we see that all states are temporary. A joyful thought arises, dances on the surface, and passes. A painful sensation arises, churns the water, and passes. In the deep, silent watching, we stop clutching at the pleasant and fleeing from the unpleasant. We let the weather of experience be what it is. Over time, this creates a profound inner balance. You can fully feel the piercing beauty of a sunset and the sharp pain of a friend's illness, yet your fundamental center, your connection to the deep, still pond, remains whole. This is the mark of a mature spirit. It is forged in silence. Let me share a story about my grandmother. She lived through wars, migrations, the loss of a child, and great personal hardship. Yet, in her later years, she possessed a tranquility that was almost tangible. One afternoon, I was visiting her, full of my own youthful anxieties about my future. I was talking at her, a river of worries. She listened patiently, knitting something soft and blue. When I finally ran out of steam, she didn't offer advice. She simply put down her knitting, reached over, and took both my hands in hers. Her hands were cool and dry, covered in thin, delicate skin that felt like parchment. She held my hands and looked into my eyes, and she didn't say a word. We sat like that for what felt like 5 full minutes, in absolute silence. I felt my anxiety buzzing in my chest like a trapped bee. But her silence was so deep, so accepting, so spacious, that gradually, the buzzing quieted. My worries didn't solve themselves, but they settled, like the snowflakes in the globe. In that shared silence, I felt held by something older and wiser than any solution. I felt the depth of her pond, and it invited me to remember my own. When she finally released my hands, she simply smiled and said, "You'll know what to do when the time comes." And somehow, I believed her. She had transmitted equanimity not through words, but through the powerful, silent field of her own being. She had been the still pond, and for a few minutes, I had stopped being just the ripples and had remembered I was water, too. This transmission points to the communal power of silence. While our practice is deeply personal, its effects ripple out and create spaces where others can find peace. Think of a library. The rule of silence in a library isn't meant to be oppressive. It's meant to be generative. It creates a shared field of quiet concentration where hundreds of individual minds can focus, learn, and create. The silence is a collaborative agreement that benefits everyone. In the same way, when you cultivate inner silence, you become a walking library of peace. You carry a quietude that can calm a frantic room, soothe a distressed friend, or simply make the space around you feel safer and more sane. Your silence becomes a gift to your environment. This is why spiritual communities, from Buddhist monasteries to Quaker meeting houses, value collective silence. In sitting together silently, a powerful group consciousness arises, a shared depth that supports each individual in their journey. You don't need to be in a monastery to experience this. You can bring this quality of generative silence to your family dinner, your workplace, your circle of friends. It starts with you, sitting alone, remembering your depth. And then, you bring that depth with you, like an invisible cloak of stillness, into the world. Now, let us explore how this inner silence, this deep pond, directly shapes the very way we perceive and interact with the world. We move from the inner landscape to the outer, understanding that in truth, there is no solid boundary between the two. Our perception is not a passive recording of objective reality, it is an active creation, and the quality of our awareness, noisy or silent, determines the world we experience. Imagine your mind as a master lens through which you view everything. When your mind is cluttered, reactive, and noisy, the lens is smudged, warped, and shaky. You look at a beautiful forest and see only the mosquitoes, the difficult hike, or your worry about getting back in time. You look at a loved one and see only their flaws, or your expectations of them, or the memory of yesterday's argument. The lens distorts and limits reality. It filters out the wholeness and presents you with a fragmented, often threatening, picture. The practice of silence is the meticulous cleaning and steadying of this lens. As the internal chatter subsides, the smudges of past conditioning and future anxiety begin to clear. The shaking of reactive emotion stills. And suddenly, you begin to see what has always been there, but was hidden by the noise. You see the intricate play of light on a leaf, not just a tree. You hear the complex symphony of birdsong, not just background noise. You see the vulnerability and humanity in another person's face, not just their role in your story. The world becomes vivid, immediate, and astonishingly detailed. It comes alive. This is the restoration of beginner's mind, Shoshin in the Zen tradition, seeing everything as if for the first time, fresh and unfiltered. This freshness is not naivete, it is the highest form of intelligence, perceiving the actuality of the present moment, free from the dusty interpretations of the past. The Buddha taught that ignorance, avijja, is the root of suffering. This ignorance is not a lack of information, but a fundamental misperception of reality caused by the noisy, craving mind. Silence dispels this ignorance by allowing us to see clearly. This clear seeing has a direct and shocking benefit on our physical and emotional well-being. Chronic stress, which is essentially the body being held in a constant state of noisy alarm, is the source of a vast array of ailments. When you cultivate silence, you are signaling to your entire nervous system that it is safe to stand down. You are moving from the sympathetic, fight or flight, state to the parasympathetic, rest and digest, state. This is not just psychological, it is biological. Your heart rate slows. Your blood pressure lowers. Your digestion improves. Your immune system functions more effectively. The body begins to heal itself from the inside out. Silence is not a luxury, it is a physiological necessity. It is the deepest form of rest, more restorative than sleep, because it is the rest of being, not just the rest of the body. In the ancient teachings, this aligned state is the foundation of health. A mind at war with itself creates a body at war with itself. A mind at peace in its own silent depth allows the body to return to its natural state of harmony. I want to tell you about a doctor I greatly admire, Dr. Eris. He works in a busy urban emergency room, a place that is the very definition of noise, chaos, and high-stakes pressure. I asked him once how he managed the stress and maintained his compassion in such an environment. He told me his secret was a practice he called the white space. Between patients, even if only for 30 seconds, he would step into a supply closet or simply turn away from the chaos, close his eyes, and drop into a pre-practiced inner silence. I imagine a page of perfect, clean, white paper, he said. I let all the noise, the beeping monitors, the shouted orders, the pain I just witnessed, become like ink blots on that paper. I don't fight the blots. I just rest in the white space around them. I become the paper, not the ink. He said those 30 seconds were like a full system reset. It cleared the psychic static from the previous case and allowed him to meet the next patient with fresh eyes and a calm center, rather than as the next item on a chaotic pile. That white space, he said, is what keeps me human. It's the silence between the notes of the trauma symphony. Without it, I'd just be another noise-making machine in the chaos. Dr. Eris's white space is a brilliant modern application of the ancient practice. It is the direct, intentional use of inner silence to create sanity and compassion in the midst of outer insanity. It proves that silence is not an escape from the world's problems, but the very resource that allows us to meet them with clarity and heart. This ability to create white space transforms not only our work but our deepest relationships. Consider the all-too-common experience of an argument with a partner or family member. The dialogue quickly descends into a noisy tennis match of past grievances, defensive posturing, and hurtful words. Each person is trapped in their own lens of distortion, seeing not the person in front of them, but a caricature woven from past pain. Now, imagine if one person, in the heat of it, could access their inner silence. Imagine if they could, just for a moment, stop the reactive words, take a conscious breath, and connect to the still pond beneath the stormy surface. From that place, they might say something entirely different. Not a rebuttal, but a genuine question. Not a defense, but an expression of what they're truly feeling underneath the anger. I feel scared when you say that, or I need to feel heard right now. This kind of communication, born from silent self-awareness, has the power to de-escalate and heal. It shifts the interaction from a battle of noisy egos to a dialogue between two human hearts. This is the practice of right speech in action, and it is impossible without the foundation of right mindfulness, the mindfulness that is rooted in silent awareness. You have to hear your own heart's truth before you can speak it clearly and kindly. Let me share a parable. There was a village that built a beautiful, clear bell at the center of town. Its sound was pure and could be heard for miles. It was used to call meetings, mark celebrations, and warn of danger. Over the years, the bell was struck countless times. But no one ever cleaned it. Gradually, a thick, hard layer of dirt, oxidation, and grime built up on its surface. When struck, it now produced only a dull, muffled thud. The villagers forgot its true sound. They argued about what was wrong. Some said the clapper was faulty. Others said the bell's location was bad. They tried striking it harder, which only made a louder, more unpleasant thud. One day, a quiet stranger came to town. He didn't offer opinions. He simply brought buckets of water, soft cloths, and a gentle, persistent patience. Day after day, he silently cleaned the bell. The villagers mocked him. "You can't clean a sound," they said. But he continued. Finally, after much work, the grime was gone. The bronze shone in the sun. He took the striker and gave the bell one gentle tap. A note of such breathtaking purity and depth rang out that it stopped every person in the village in their tracks. Tears came to their eyes. They had forgotten their own bell's true voice. Our mind-heart is that bell. Life's experiences, our reactions, our stored hurts, our busyness, this is the grime that muffles our true sound. The practice of silence is not about striking ourselves harder with discipline or new techniques. It is the gentle, persistent, patient cleaning of the bell. It is the removal of everything that is not our essential, clear-natured awareness. And as we clean, our true note, our innate wisdom, compassion, and peace, begins to ring out on its own, effortlessly, beautifying the world around us. Let us now consider silence not just as a personal tool, but as a doorway to a different dimension of understanding, one that connects you to something vast, timeless, and intimately interwoven with all of life. We've spoken of the pond, the canyon, the lens, the bell. But these are still images of a separate self, however spacious. The deeper revelation of silence is the dissolution of the sense of separation itself. In the utter quiet, when the mind's compulsive labeling and storytelling finally rests, a more fundamental mode of knowing emerges. It is not knowledge about things, but a direct, unmediated being with what is. You don't hear the bird, you are the hearing. You don't feel the breeze, you are the feeling. The observer and the observed begin to merge. The boundary between, in here, and out there, softens, like a line drawn in sand that is washed away by the incoming tide. This is not a philosophical idea, it is an experiential reality that silence makes available. In Buddhism, this is the direct perception of dependent origination and interbeing, the understanding that nothing exists independently. You are not an isolated bell ringing in a void. You are a note in a vast, cosmic symphony, and your silence allows you to hear the whole composition. Imagine you are a single cell in a gigantic, living organism, perhaps a great redwood tree. As a cell in a leaf, your daily experience might be all about photosynthesis, managing sunlight and carbon dioxide. You might feel separate from the cells in the root, far below in the dark soil. But in truth, you are connected through an immense, silent network of vessels, the xylem and phloem. Water and nutrients from the roots silently travel up to you. Sugars you create silently travel down to nourish the roots. Your existence is entirely dependent on this silent exchange. If you could quiet your cellular thoughts enough, you might sense the entire tree as your larger body. You might feel the sap rising as your own lifeblood. You might feel the deep, anchoring silence of the roots as your own foundation. This is a metaphor for our human condition. We feel like separate leaves, buffeted by our own private winds. But through the practice of deep silence, we can begin to sense the silent network that connects us all, the shared consciousness, the interdependent web of life. We feel the suffering of another as a tremor in our own being. We feel the joy of the world as our own celebration. This is the birth of universal compassion, karuna, which is not a duty but a natural expression of realizing our interconnected nature. It flows from the silent understanding that there is no other. This realization brings us to what might be the most shocking benefit of all. Silence reveals that what you have been seeking, peace, love, wholeness, is not something to acquire, but the very ground of your being. You are not a sinner seeking salvation, a broken thing seeking fixing, or an empty vessel seeking filling. In the clear light of silent awareness, you see that your essential nature is already whole, already peaceful, already loving. The noise of your life has just been a forgetting of this fact. The Buddha's most radical teaching is that you are, in your deepest essence, already awake. Tathagatagarbha, the Buddha nature, is the term. It is the potential for awakening present in all beings, like an acorn containing the mighty oak. Silence is the sunlight and rain that allows this seed to germinate and grow. You are not manufacturing enlightenment, you are uncovering what has been covered by the noise of grasping and aversion. I had an experience that pointed to this many years ago, during a period of intense silent practice on a long retreat. For days, I had been wrestling with a deep-seated sense of unworthiness, a familiar and painful inner noise. One afternoon, sitting in the meditation hall, a wave of this feeling arose, thicker and darker than ever. Instead of my usual pattern of fighting it or collapsing into it, I was so exhausted that I simply gave up. I surrendered completely to the feeling. I let it be there, without any story, without any resistance. I fell into it, as if into a deep, black well. And I kept falling. But then, a miracle occurred. I didn't hit bottom. The feeling of unworthiness, in the absolute center of its darkness, suddenly, turned inside out. It didn't disappear, it transformed. In the heart of what felt like the most solid, real, me problem imaginable, I discovered not more problem, but space. vast, open, luminous space. And in that space was a quiet, unshakable knowing, this aware space, is what I am. And it has never been damaged, never been unworthy, never been born, and will never die. The problematic feeling became like a tiny shadow cast on a continent of sunlight. It didn't vanish, but it became utterly insignificant in the face of the reality that contained it. It was a moment of profound grace, a gift from the depth of silence. It taught me that our deepest wounds are not healed by being eliminated, but by being seen through, by being realized as temporary formations appearing in, and made of, the same boundless, silent awareness that we are. The healing is the remembering of our true size. This leads us to the stories of ordinary awakening, the moments when silence breaks through in daily life. I think of a bus driver named Henry. He drove the same crosstown route for 30 years. He told me he knew every pothole, every traffic light pattern, every regular passenger by sight. The job could be monotonous, frustrating. But Henry had a secret practice. At one particular stop, where a large old beech tree overhung the road, he would always pause for a few extra seconds, even if no one was getting on or off. He'd look up through his windshield at the canopy. "I just drink it in," he said. "The way the light filters through a million green leaves. The silence of that tree. For those few seconds, I'm not a bus driver. I'm not in traffic. I'm just here. With the tree. And then I drive on. But I carry a little piece of that quiet with me for the rest of the loop." Henry had found his portal. His few seconds of intentional, shared silence with a tree were his meditation hall, his monastery. It recalibrated him. It reminded him of the larger, quieter reality within which his busy job was just a small scene. His story shows us that portals to silence are everywhere, in a tree, in the steam from your coffee, in the eyes of a pet, in the pause after a melody ends. We don't need special conditions, we only need the willingness to stop and truly meet what is in front of us, in wordless attention. And finally, consider the story of two potters. The first potter was famous for his speed and volume. His workshop was a frenzy of spinning wheels, flying clay, and constant production. He made hundreds of identical, functional pots. The second potter was slow, almost unknown. She would spend days just preparing her clay, wedging it with a slow, rhythmic patience. She would sit with the lump of clay on her wheel for a long time before starting, her hands resting on it, feeling its temperament. When she finally began to throw, her movements were so slow and deliberate they seemed like a meditation. She made few pots, but each one had a presence. When you held one, it felt alive, peaceful, somehow complete. The difference was not just skill, but silence. The first potter's mind was in the future, on the output, on the noise of production. The second potter's mind was fully in the present, in a silent conversation with the clay itself. Her pots were not just made, they were coaxed into being from a place of deep, silent listening. They contained the silence of their making. Our lives are the clay. We can choose to live like the first potter, noisy, hurried, mass-producing experiences without depth. Or we can choose the way of the second. Bringing silent, patient, present moment awareness to the shaping of our days. The life lived from silence may have fewer frantic events, but it will have a depth of texture, a beauty of form, and a palpable sense of peace that the noisy life can never replicate. It becomes an artifact of grace. We have journeyed together through many landscapes of silence, from the cluttered attic to the deep pond, from the steady mountain to the infinite sky, from the dirty lens to the clean bell. We have sat with the bus driver and the potter, the fisherman and the doctor. We have explored how silence heals, clarifies, connects, and reveals. Now, as we draw our shared time to a close, let us gather all these threads into a simple, practical understanding. How do you actually live this? Not as a concept for a quiet evening, but as a sustained reality in a noisy world. The answer is both profound and disarmingly simple. You practice not by adding something to your life, but by subtracting the interference. You don't need to become a different person. You don't need to acquire a special state. You only need to recognize and return, again and again, to the silent awareness that is already, always, here. It is the background of every experience, the canvas on which every thought is painted. Your entire spiritual life is the gentle remembering of this background as your true home. The Buddha provided a magnificent roadmap for this homecoming in the Noble Eightfold Path. Every element of that path, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, is ultimately about creating the conditions for this silent, awake awareness to flourish and to express itself wisely in the world. It is a path of alignment, of tuning your instrument so it can resonate with the fundamental note of reality. And at the heart of this alignment is the cultivation of silence through mindfulness and concentration. It is the core practice. So, let us end with the most direct invitation I can offer you. It is not a lengthy technique, but a foundational attitude. I call it the practice of the sacred return. This is how it works. You go about your day. You will, inevitably, get lost. You will be captured by a worry about the future. You will be hooked by an irritation from the past. You will be swept into the noisy river of planning, judging, and wanting. This is not failure. This is the human condition. The practice begins the moment you notice you are lost. That moment of noticing is a spark of grace. It is your innate wisdom flickering to life. In that moment, you have a choice. You can follow the noise deeper into the forest. Or you can make the sacred return. The return is this: pause everything. For the duration of one single breath, an in-breath and an out-breath. Stop the world. Let your awareness drop out of your thinking head and into the feeling of your body. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the air on your skin. Feel the breath moving in your torso. For these 3 to 5 seconds, do not think about your breath. Be the breath. Be the sensation. Be the awareness that knows the sensation. In that micro-moment, you have returned. You have stepped out of the movie of your thoughts and back into the silent, aware space of the projector booth. You have touched the canyon wall. You have tasted the depth of the pond. That is all. Then, you go back to your day. You might be lost again in 30 seconds. It doesn't matter. The habit you are building is not one of perpetual silence, that is a fruit that ripens in its own time. The habit you are building is the habit of the return. The muscle you are strengthening is the one that knows how to come home. Do this 10 times a day, and you will feel a difference. Do it 100 times, and your life will begin to change. The cumulative effect of these tiny returns is immense. They are like drops of water slowly wearing away the stone of your habitual noise, revealing the smooth, silent shape beneath. This practice turns ordinary life into a continuous meditation. Washing dishes becomes an opportunity to feel the warmth of the water in silent awareness. Waiting in line becomes a chance to feel the posture of your body, the play of sounds around you, without commentary. A moment of frustration becomes a signal bell, inviting you to return to the breath and the body, to find the space around the reaction. Life becomes not a distraction from your practice, but the very field in which it flowers. Remember the story of the two potters. You are the clay and the potter. Every sacred return is a gentle, mindful touch on the spinning wheel of your day, shaping your experience from chaos towards coherence, from reactivity towards presence. You are creating a life that contains the silence of its own making. As we part ways in this format, know that the true teaching has never been in these words. The words are merely fingers pointing at the moon. The moon is the silent, aware presence that you are. Don't cling to the finger. Look at the moon. Taste the silence for yourself. You carry within you everything you need. You are the mountain. You are the sky. You are the deep, still pond. You are the clean bell, and your true note is waiting to ring out, clear and pure, through the simple, courageous act of being quiet and listening. Thank you for sharing this journey into silence here at Monk's Temple. This is not an ending, but an embedding, a planting of a seed in the fertile soil of your attention. If you wish to nurture this seed, to have gentle reminders to make the sacred return, then we welcome you to join our community by subscribing. It is a way of choosing, again and again, to remember the depth within the daily surface. But above all, trust yourself. Trust the silence that is your birthright. Go gently into your world. Listen more than you speak. Pause more than you rush. And in the midst of the beautiful, terrible, noisy miracle of being alive, never forget that you have a sanctuary that travels with you everywhere, the sanctuary of your own silent, awake, and loving heart. Be well. Be at peace. The silence is your home. You are always welcome here.